called Addicted to Addiction. Not all addictions are loud and demand attention like heroin or meth addictions. Some are silent but deadly, like David Sheff's. In the memoir, Beautiful Boy by David Sheff, David obsesses over his son, Nick's addiction, in a way that is almost just as dangerous as a drug addiction. His addiction is mostly in his mind and his heart as he tries to help his son through a devastating meth addiction. Most people would not be able to see his addiction, but it is most definitely there. Ultimately, David has an unhealthy addiction to Nick's addiction as he cannot let go of it, and while their addictions share many differences like desire or lack of desire to get well, the high they experience or don't, and the way they treat others, they also share many similarities, like the need to get help and how miserable they were, which can be eye-opening and educational to many people. It is a long journey for both of these addicts. The addiction that David suffers from is the addiction to his son's problems. He is constantly worrying about Nick, and it begins to affect his own health. He becomes exhausted and eventually grows bitter with Nick's actions. Despite the negative effects, David cannot stop worrying. Sheff writes, "Every time the telephone rings, my stomach constricts." His addiction has him on edge and anxious when the phone rings. Sheff says, "The therapist says that parents of children on drugs often get a form of post-traumatic stress syndrome made worse by the reoccurring nature of addiction, but we live with a time bomb. It is debilitating to be independent on another's moods and decisions and actions. Post-traumatic stress disorders are not just for soldiers. This disorder can be for a person fighting any kind of battle." As Nick continues to relapse again and again, it adds to David's stress. David can never quite give up hope, but each time his son relapses, it crushes him. Sheff goes on to say, "Addicts are agitated and confused, and most stop eating and sleeping. Parents of addicts don't sleep either." This statement goes to show that he suffers through every part of Nick's addiction while having his own of not being able to let go of his son's actions. As the parent of an addict, he fails to mention that he is not just lacking sleep, as he is also agitated and confused. He is agitated that Nick cannot stay clean. He grows tired of the pattern. He is also confused as to why Nick developed this addiction. He wonders if it is his own fault. He shows many feelings to the readers throughout the book. It is clear that David needs help just like Nick because his addiction is getting in the way of daily activities in his life. These thoughts of Nick and addicts consume his mind, and he cannot seem to escape them, which is what leads one to infer that David also has an addiction. There are some big differences between the two addictions. There is the basic difference that David is not addicted to drugs like Nick, but there are deeper differences. Sheff writes, "The disparity between our two worlds continues to stun and overwhelm. This shows how David is constantly desperate for Nick to get help and stay clean, but Nick only has limited moments in which he wants to get help. David does not realize his own addiction at this point, but when he does realize he has a serious problem, he seeks professional help to get better." Another difference resides in the benefit of the addiction. Sheff says, "Meth triggers 10 to 20 times the normal level of the brain's neurotransmitters, primarily dopamine, but also serotonin and norepinephrine, which spray like bullets from a gangster's gun. I felt fantastic, supremely confident, euphoric." This shows the difference that David does not get to feel as many good feelings as Nick does. The only relief that David is able to obtain is when Nick either agrees to rehab or stays clean. Neither of those options happened frequently. A tremendous difference was in the attitude towards others. Sheff writes, "We haven't allowed him to see Daisy and Jasper yet. We don't want them to get hurt again. We all are still torn apart by the warring between our fear and our love. We want to protect Daisy and Jasper, and yet they love him and he loves them." David is always thinking about others and never putting himself first, but Nick is always thinking about himself and never being considerate of others. Nick's little siblings adore him and think the world of him, but he ends up stealing money from them to pay for more drugs. A large part of David's problem is that even though it is important to be considerate of others, it is dangerous for a person to never let themselves come first. There are similarities in their addictions too. Sheff says, "I know I must do everything possible to get him into a rehab program. I call counselors and other specialists for recommendations. Just as it is important for Nick to get professional help, it is also important for David. Both of their problems seem to be mental health issues. Mental health issues are the toughest ones because there is never a quick fix. It requires years of hard work and persistence, which both of these men have to do. Another similarity is that they are both miserably unhappy. Chef says, "When I am alone, however, I weep in a way that I have not wept since I was a young boy." It is clear that David is sad and truly just worn down with this statement. Nick is also unhappy because when someone uses drugs and all of the hormones or chemicals in their body skyrocket, it makes normal levels feel utterly depressing. This is why drug addicts typically have such a tough time quitting. David and Nick suffered together, and they both wound up getting the professional help that they needed because they realized they were not healthy. While David never ended up in a hospital on the verge of death like his son did, he is able to convey his feelings through his words to the readers that he felt like he was right there with Nick on the verge of death. If a loved one is sick in the head and killing themselves with an addiction, the odds are in favor that there will be an empath beside them who just cannot help but die with them. There is no denying the toxic addiction David has to his son's meth problem. These sorts of addictions get lost in the drug user's addictions every day, which is why Beautiful Boy is such an important portrayal of the silent but deadly addictions that go unnoticed.